Hi, I'm Chris from Core Freedom, and today we're going to talk about all things patient lifts. We're going to answer the most frequently asked questions we get, and with me I have Matt Maynard, who is really our patient lift guru here at Core Freedom. And first, since we already have an overhead patient lift right here in this room, Matt, let's start there. Can you tell us more about overhead patient lifts, how they work, the pros and cons, all of that?
Absolutely, Chris. This is a fixed ceiling overhead patient lift. This one also has a powered drive on it, so you would be able to just use the remote here to move yourself about the patient lift. It's a very simple remote, just up and down functions, and then the transverse function. This can be used with many different slings, many different carry bars. So this one here is just a 2-point carry bar. This here is a universal sling with head support. This is going to be your most standard features that you're going to see used on most patient lifts. This list also can be set up in a configuration where it could be room covering. There would be more rail in the ceiling, but then you could use a transverse rail that would move across them, and then you could get anywhere inside of this room. This configuration here is one of our most common. This will be for a simple transfer to go from your bed to your mobility device. And Chris is kind enough to be an example for us. So we're just going to take a minute here, get him hooked up into the sling, and then show you what this thing can do. It's important always to cross your straps on your legs to increase the stability. And you always want to make sure you're using the same color on your straps. So if we were going to use this gray, we just make sure you use gray on both sides. If we would like to sit Chris up a little higher, like bring his head up higher, we could have used the green straps for the top. And it's okay to use the gray. As long as you're using both gray on the bottom, both green on the top, you'll be just fine. And this will give him a more seated position when we pick him up.
So then, does the sling ride with me, or what happens now?
Fortunately, yes. You usually sit in your sling most of the day.
Okay, so I have another question. Who can most benefit from an overhead lift like this one?
I would say anybody who has a difficult time transferring or finds it impossible to transfer, especially on their own or if they need a caregiver to transfer. But it's not only safer for the patient, it's also safer for the caregiver. Typically, it's really easy to get hurt trying to move someone from a bed to a chair or any other medical device. And it would just make everything safer for everybody involved.
Okay, so this thing seems pretty heavy duty, and I think I was here when it was installed. And isn't it mounted into the trusses of the home?
That's correct.
Okay, so what about a bariatric situation? You have a bariatric patient. Can this handle someone that is in that situation?
Yes, so this lift is rated up to 440 pounds. That's pretty standard. If you were heavier than the 440 pounds, they do make lifts that go higher than that, all the way up to 770, to my knowledge. But this rail situation and configuration could handle the higher weight capacity also.
The other question too is, so we're in this room, but am I wrong in saying that they make them where you could actually go from room to room without actually getting off of this lift?
Yeah, just like the possibilities and slings are almost endless, the configurations for room systems also are almost endless.
So I could go from here to the bathroom and then transfer onto the toilet using this, potentially?
Correct, potentially.
Okay.
Yes.
So this unit is powered both up and down to lift the patient, but it also powers itself along the rail, right?
Correct.
Am I wrong in saying that they make them without power along the rail where you actually have to move the patient physically?
Yeah, it's most standard do not come powered. That is an option you have to add, is to get the power.
Okay. Is there any cons to having no power to it, or is it pretty easy still to move if you just have to?
It's very easy to move. You could put me up in this, and if it was not powered, you could move me around very, very simply.
Okay.
It's everything's on ball bearing rollers inside of this aluminum rail. Moves very, very easily.
Okay. So there are a lot of different patient lift styles, right? And we're familiar with a handful of those, and I think it'd be beneficial to our customers and people watching to know kind of what those lifts are, how they operate, and the pros and cons of each. So starting with the overhead ceiling lift that we have in here, How do they basically operate, and what are the pros and cons of that particular lift?
Yes, this is a fixed ceiling lift mount. For this particular lift, you do have to, like you said earlier, install structure above your ceiling. There's going to be holes drilled through your ceiling. So you do have to do some alterations to the home to mount a lift like this. And it would be the same if we were doing the whole room traversing. We would have to mount above the ceiling, poke some holes down through the ceiling to mount everything. So there is some modification time to your home. And the installation time is actually considerable because you're only seeing about 25% of what's happening below the ceiling here. There's actually a lot of steel that goes in the ceiling to make sure that it can hold the weight.
But from a patient and caregiver standpoint, it's probably no lift that's more efficient for them than this style, right?
Absolutely. Here you maintain the clean floor, everything's up, secured, nothing to worry about. This is definitely, to maintain mobility, especially in a small room like this, it's a good idea to get the ceiling mount.
Okay, so another lift style is Gantry, and I think I know a little bit about these. So they're basically a post system, right? They mount to the floor, but they have a track similar to this overhead patient lift, right?
Yeah, in operation, it's going to be very similar to this, although it would just be a post on either side with very large feet to keep it stable, and then just the uprights that this will mount to.
Okay, so less invasive as far as installation and probably on cost too, because you don't have the labor going into it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, usually a gantry system can go up in just a couple of hours.
Okay.
So here we have a manual style lift, floor lift. It's a hydraulic cylinder, just like you'd have in a jack. This is a little harder to use on the caregiver, especially depending on the floor, because this is just on wheels. So if we have a carpet like we have in here, a thick pile carpet, it is going to be very hard to use once your patient is inside the lift. Chris is kind enough again to have us lift him up, and we'll kind of show you what that looks like. Okay, that's all the way up. Now we're gonna try and move him, like I said, on this carpet, because it's a thick pile carpet. This is definitely harder on your caregiver, trying to get your patient around and into their mobility device.
For reference, I'm about 210 pounds, which is, you could easily have a grown adult in a situation like this that weighs about what I do, or more.
Correct. It's much harder to manage, just trying to keep both of my hands on the lift, keep him from flinging around. And now I'm stuck in a corner. So, but as you can see, this is much more difficult. That's why we prefer the overhead style patient lift.
So are you saying that you normally wouldn't recommend this style?
It's very situational. I would say if you have a thick pile carpet, if you're an elderly caregiver, or especially if your patient weighs a lot more than your caregiver, this would be a really hard to maneuver situation. You'd be much better off going with an overhead patient lift. And here we have an orbital style patient lift that has a single mounting point from the floor to the ceiling. It goes in very simply. It uses what they call a portable unit. So you would definitely need a caregiver working with you, but then you could have an orbital in your bedroom, an orbital in your bathroom, and then one motor you could transfer between the multiple units, because this is typically the expensive part. And then you could have mobility in your bedroom and also in your bathroom without doing a track system all the way through your entire house. This system is limited to using a portable motor because of the style connection. It's not in that rail system like you've seen earlier, but you do get a decent range of motion. Watch the fan here. But you know, we would be able to pick you up from inside the bed here and then get you out. Again, if there was a patient in here, you'd be using the patient to control this. Get you out here and then be able to put you in your mobility device.
But hopefully you've learned a lot more about patient lifts today. But to be honest with you, there's a ton to learn and we really didn't even scratch the surface. So if you have additional questions, feel free to give our office a call and our staff will be happy to answer any questions you have or even do an evaluation if that's what you need. Thanks again.